Alright, so here's walking through the vertical model from the lecture notes. So we've got two firms. One's the upstream firm. This firm's in Ireland. It makes an intermediate good. We'll call those potatoes. To grow a kilo of potatoes costs you 19. In addition, you got to spend a fixed cost of 51.52 as a potato tax. Anyway, so you can also think about that as the proprietary good cost. So the Irish firm sells these to a firm located in the UK. They use them to make chips. If you want to make 1 kilo of chips, you need 2 kilos of potatoes. In addition, it's going to cost the English firm another 10 for cooking oil, and then the demand for chips, which is the final good, not the intermediate good, is 2,000 minus the number of chips divided by 2. So first step, always write out your profits. So we have the upstream firm in Ireland, where Q is the quantity of potatoes. So their profits are going to be the price of the intermediate good, the price of a potato, minus the cost of making potatoes, times the amount of potatoes sold, minus their fixed cost. Downstream in the UK, this is the price of chips times the number of chips that they want to produce, minus for every amount of chips they make, they need to spend the intermediate good price 2 times because they need 2 kilos of potatoes to make 1 unit of chips, minus their cooking oil costs. So we can rewrite the upstream firm as 2 times the quantity of the upstream firm's intermediate amount as 2 times the quantity of the downstream. So again, what's going on here? For every chip, how many potatoes do you need? 2 times that number. So if you're making 1 chip, you need 2 potatoes. 4 chips, you need 8 potatoes, so on and so forth. Right there is where most people are going to screw up the math. So keep an eye on that. Practice that for a little bit. Why is that useful? Well, because we can plug that in to get rid of the big Q up here in the upstream firm's profits, so that way we're just dealing with little q's. So I'm replacing the big Q with 2 times little q. So we can rewrite the profits as 2 times the price of a potato times the amount of chips that get sold, minus 34, 2 times 17, times the quantity of chips that get sold, minus the fixed cost. So now we've got everything in chips as opposed to chips and potatoes. It makes life easier. So suppose we have 2 monopolists. Always start with the downstream firm. Why? Because the one thing we don't have is, although we have the price inverse demand for chips, we don't have inverse demand for potatoes. We got to figure that out when we've got 2 monopolists. So start with the downstream firm. So what does the downstream firm do? What all good firms do, they set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. Take the derivative of revenues to come up with 2,000 minus quantity, and then costs are 2 times the price of a potato plus the cost of oil. So we use this equation, and what we're after is to solve for the price of a potato, the price of the intermediate good. So how do you get that? Well, take away 10 from 2,000, you get 1990, minus the quantity of chips that get sold, divided by 2, which comes from right there, and then that is the inverse demand for potatoes, for the intermediate good. Then we can take that and we go back up to the upstream firm. So their profits were 2 times the price of potato times the amount of chips, minus 34 times the amount of chips, minus fixed cost. And all I'm doing here is plugging in that inverse demand curve I just found out. So I'm going to get rid of this 2 here, multiply through by 2, so I get 1990 minus Q times Q, minus 34 times the number of chips, minus 51.52. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This is the derivative of marginal revenue right here. That's the derivative of cost, 34. So then you solve for Q, 1990 minus 34 divided by 2 is equal to 978. That's how many chips get produced. How many potatoes are we talking about? Twice that number, because you need 2 kilos of potatoes for every chip. So you get 1956 in terms of the number of potatoes. Now we know the quantities for everything. Now we can figure out our prices. Price of chips is 2,000 minus the number of chips divided by 2, 1511. Price of a potato is 9.95 minus the quantity of chips divided by 2, 506. Now we can go and plug those into our profits. So what's the profit for the upstream guy? 2 times the price of potatoes minus the cost of potatoes times the number of chips that get sold minus your fixed costs, and you come up with 956,484. What's the profit of the downstream firm, the guy over in the UK? It's the price of chips times the number of chips minus what they spend on potatoes, 2 times the price of potatoes times the number of chips minus what they spend on cooking oil, so you get 478,242. So that's with 2 monopolists. What happens with a monopoly? Well, the whole point of a monopoly is rather than having 2 separate firms, it's one firm that works all together. So The total profits worldwide are what they get in the downstream part of the firm over in the UK, plus what they get in the Irish part of the firm, what they get in Ireland. So what is this? Again, it's the price of chips times the number of chips minus what they spend on potatoes they buy from themselves, minus what they spend on cooking oil, plus what they get in revenues on potatoes they buy from themselves, minus the cost of producing enough potatoes for 1 kilo of chips, minus the fixed cost. And what's really key here is the intermediate good price cancels out. With no taxes or with equal taxes, that goes away. We'll bring taxes back into the mix later on in a different lecture. But anyway, so that goes away, and we have a real simple profit function to deal with. So we're going to combine these two to come up with 44. Now it's just our revenues minus our variable costs minus fixed cost. What do you do then? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. It's just simpler this time because we only have one firm to worry about, the multinational. Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So 2,000 minus 44 is equal to the number of chips. So 1956. How many potatoes are we talking about? Twice that, so it should be 2 times Q there. 3912. What's the price of chips? Well, you plug that 1956 into the demand equation. 2,000 minus 1956 over 2. What do you come up with? The price of chips are 1,022. These are some really awesome chips. So what are profits? When you plug the price and your quantities back into the profit function, you come up with 1.9 million. So what's the price of potatoes? Well, who knows? It's anything you want because it cancels out. The firm doesn't care about what the price of potatoes are until we bring taxes back into the mix.